You know those picture-perfect Instagram posts of snow-dusted cottages that look straight out of a fairy tale? Let me shatter that illusion. Surviving in Edwardian winter was nothing like those cozy, filtered daydreams. Early 1900s Britain was statistically the most lethal time in history to endure brutal winters. Historians estimate that during particularly vicious Edwardian winters, as many as 1 in 15 elderly or young children simply didn't live to see spring. This wasn't just discomfort, it was a daily fight for survival. And if you're enjoying these stories, a like or subscribe would mean the world. I'm endlessly fascinated by where you're listening from. So drop a comment with your location and local time. It blows my mind how people drift off to this tale across time zones. Now, let's transport you to rural England, 1905. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. But first, get comfortable. Fluff those pillows, wrap yourself in a blanket, because where we're headed, you'll need every bit of warmth you can muster. Congratulations, you've just woken up in a cramped Edwardian farmhouse in Devonshire. The first thing you notice? The bone-deep cold. Not the, oh, I'll grab a sweater kind, but the, I can see my breath crystallizing in the air above my bed kind. Your nose is numb, fingers stiff as icicles. Forget your plush modern mattress. You're lying on a horsehair slab that retains heat about, as well as an ice sheet. The only warmth comes from the mountain of scratchy wool blankets weighing you down like a medieval torture device. Now comes the real fun, mustering the will to leave your meager warmth cocoon. The bare wooden floorboards might as well be frozen lake ice. No thermostat to crank up here, just sheer grit. If you're lucky, you might have a ceramic hot water bottle tucked at your feet. More likely, a brick wrapped in cloth, heated in last night's dying embers, now stone cold. Frost ferns bloom across the inside of your window, not outside, inside, where your exhales have frozen into delicate, haunting patterns. Beautiful? Maybe. Aching reminder of your fragile existence? Absolutely. Your clothes sit waiting on a chair, layer upon layer of survival armor. First, wool undergarments. Not today's soft merino, but fabric so coarse it feels like wearing a cactus. Then a shirt or blouse, a waistcoat, petticoats for women, a thick wool dress or jacket, scarves, stockings, leather boots stuffed with newspaper for insulation, and finally a wool cap jammed over your ears. Dressing is a 20-minute ordeal, but once fully armored, you're almost ready to face the inside of your own house. The morning's first critical task, resurrecting the fire. Not for comfort, for survival. The cast iron kitchen range is the heart of the home. Stove, oven, water heater, and sole source of warmth. But first, you wrestle with yesterday's ashes, digging for live embers in the sooty remains, gray dust coating your hands, face, clothes. Nothing's wasted. Ashes will polish silver, make soap, fertilize gardens. Building a new fire is a painstaking ritual. Crumpled newspaper, if you're lucky, kindling arranged just so, precious coal layered on top. You strike a match, nurse the flame with careful breaths, watching for that first red glow in the coal, your daily triumph. Heat vanishes almost as fast as it's made. These homes lack modern insulation, just brick or stone walls with single-pane windows leaking icy drafts. Clever tricks help. Heavy curtains partition rooms, screens create warmth pockets. Everyone huddles near the kitchen's meager heat. Breakfast is a lesson in seasonal scarcity. No grocery runs here. Winter meals come from summer's preserved bounty. The larder reveals pickled vegetables, salted meat hanging like grim ornaments, root vegetables buried in sand. The star? Porridge, oats simmered with water, maybe a splash of milk if the cows still produce. It's thick, bland, but steaming, a lifeline of warmth and slow-burning energy. Meanwhile, the men brave the outdoors. Livestock won't feed themselves. Water troughs are frozen solid. Hay must be hauled through snow. The barn offers slight respite. Animal body heat taking the edge off. Breaking ice for thirsty animals. Assessing each creature's health. These observations separate prosperity from catastrophe. Back inside, the kitchen hums with activity. Water boils for washing. Bread dough rises near the fire. Soups simmer for hours. Root vegetables and preserved meat stretch into stews, calorie-dense fuel for bodies burning energy just to stay warm. By mid-morning, the household is a symphony of winter labor. Children feed the fire, haul coal, chase embers. Women mend endlessly, darning socks, patching quilts, spinning wool. Every stitch is a barrier against the cold. Outside, the winter farm reveals its brutal rhythm. This isn't the season for growing, but for sheer survival, both human and animal. The livestock demand constant attention. Their well-being directly dictates your family's fate through the hungry months ahead. Picture the farmer at dawn, his lantern cutting a feeble path through the pre-dawn gloom as he trudges toward the barn. Inside, the animals stir at his arrival, their collective body heat offering the faintest reprieve from the killing cold. But the water troughs were crowns of ice that must be shattered before the herd can drink. Hay, carefully rationed from the mushroom-shaped rick, designed to outsmart rats, gets distributed with calloused hands that no longer feel the cold, or anything at all. Every animal gets scrutinized like a battlefield medic triaging soldiers. Is the pregnant ewe favoring one side? Does the milk cow's udder show signs of frostbite? These observations aren't hypothetical. They're the difference between spring prosperity and utter ruin. Sheep require particular cunning in winter. The local Devon close-wool breed, evolved over centuries for these conditions, still falls victim to snowdrifts. Their sodden fleece becomes a death trap as exhaustion sets in. Savvy farmers thread bells around the flock. When blizzards erase all visibility, the tinkling guides desperate digs to free buried animals. Sometimes only the bell's tip protrudes from the snow, a macabre beacon signaling another life hanging in the balance. Pregnant ewes get VIP treatment in makeshift lambing pens lined with straw. But vigilance comes at a cost. Sleepless nights hunched in unheated barns, watching for complications by flickering lantern light. Imagine your modern exhaustion after binge-watching shows. Then picture this. 3 a.m. in January, kneeling on frozen dirt as a ewe strains to deliver, your entire livelihood hinging on whether both survive until dawn. Pigs, at least, are winter's pragmatists. Their stone sties get extra straw for burrowing, and they instinctively pile together like living hot water bottles. Extra rations compensate for calories burned shivering. After all, these walking pantries transform kitchen scraps into next winter's bacon through ruthless efficiency. Preservation, the unsung hero of Edwardian winters. Without refrigeration, meat gets salted into submission, packed in barrels where the mineral sucks out moisture and life from bacteria. Some cuts graduate to the smokehouse, where smoldering fires infuse flavor while creating a paradoxical oasis of warmth. Kids often get smokehouse duty, their small hands tending fires while stealing precious heat. Meanwhile, the farm's infrastructure gets its winter makeover. The wagon shed morphs into a workshop where frozen fingers sand splintered handles and stitch torn harnesses. Every tool tells a story. The plow that fed last summer's harvest, the hoe that will break ground come spring. These repairs aren't hobbies, they're promises to future selves. Hedge laying becomes an art form in winter's idle months. Using billhooks, wickedly curved blades that demand respect, farmers sculpt overgrown shrubs into living fences. Part sculpture, part survival, each pleached branch heals at angles to form impenetrable barriers against snow and straying stock. It's backbreaking work where a slip could sever tendons, but done right, these hedges outlast stone walls. The garden, though dormant, still offers Brussels sprouts and kale defiantly gripping frozen soil. Clever tricks stretched the harvest. Cold frames, repurposed windows turned mini greenhouses shelter greens, while mulch blankets protect root vegetables. When supper calls, someone braves the elements to excavate carrots from their earthen bunker, their breath fogging the air as they claw through frost-stiffened straw. Indoors, the kitchen asserts its dominance. The cast-iron range, now roaring, hosts a ballet of preservation and fermentation. Crocks of sauerkraut bubble quietly, transforming cabbage into vitamin C gold. Milk cultures morph into cheese, a slow alchemy where winter's chill becomes an ally. Nothing gets wasted. Whey from cheese making goes into bread, while meat scraps flavor bone broths that simmer for days. Dinner is both celebration and fuel. Thick vegetable soups fortified with slivers of salt beef, served with bread still crackling from the oven. Calories aren't counted, they're worshipped. The fatty broth glistens under lamplight, a tangible victory against the cold still gnawing at the door. As the weak winter sun climbs toward noon, the farmhouse becomes a hive of orchestrated chaos. Every family member locked into their survival role. The kitchen, now thick with the smell of simmering bone broth and fresh bread, serves as command central. This is where strategy gets plotted against the unrelenting cold. The farmer's wife moves with the precision of a general, her wool skirts swishing as she tends multiple cooking stations. At the range, a cast iron pot burbles with yesterday's leftover stew, now enriched with marrow bones cracked open to unleash their precious fat. Nearby, dough proofs in a wooden trough, its slow rise monitored like a sleeping child. She knows exactly when to punch it down. Too early, and the bread will be dense as a brick. Too late, and it'll collapse into sour disappointment. Her hands tell stories no diary could capture. Fingertips permanently calloused from handling scalding pots. Nails stained yellow from peeling turnips. A network of fine scars from decades of butchery accidents. These aren't the soft hands of Instagram homesteaders. They're working tools that julienne carrots with the same efficiency they use to deliver breech lambs in midnight emergencies. Upstairs, the elderly grandmother presides over textile operations like a seasoned factory foreman. Her corner by the south-facing window, precious daylight becomes a mending station where socks get resurrected through the magic of darning. The rhythm of her wooden darning egg echoes like a metronome, tap-tap thrust, as she weaves new life into threadbare heels. A hole is just an opportunity for stronger stitching, she mutters, passing the wisdom to wide-eyed grandchildren. Those children alternate between chores and stolen moments of play. The eldest boy, barely 12, practices his whittling on scrap wood, carving replacement handles for tools he'll wield come spring. His sister, 10 going on 40, stirs a pot of laundry starch with one hand while using the other to prevent her toddler brother from toppling into the hearth. Their games reflect their world: ice rescue with stick sheep or storm prep, where they race to pile pebbles, standing in for coal, before an imaginary blizzard hits. Meanwhile, the farmer and his hired man brave the merciless outdoors. Their current mission: checking drainage ditches that could mean the difference between fertile spring fields and flooded wastelands. Frozen ground is a blessing. It lets them walk atop swampy areas that would swallow them whole in thaw. They probe the ice with spades like Arctic explorers, listening for the telltale crack that signals weak spots. Funny thing, the farmer remarks as his breath swirls around his face. Mud's worse than ice come winter. At least frost lets you walk proper like. His companion nods, recalling winters when February thaws turned lanes into quagmires that sucked boots clean off feet. They've learned to read the weather like priests deciphering omens. The way clouds scud across the horizon, how their joints ache before snowfall, the particular scent of approaching sleet. Back in the dairy shed, the milkmaid wages her own battle against time and temperature. Her bare hands, red and cracked from constant washing, work the udders with practiced motions. The milk hits the pails still warm from the cow's body, but in this cold, it could begin forming ice crystals before she finishes the next heat. Straining it through muslin becomes a race against the clock, the liquid gold poured into shallow pans where cream will rise like salvation. Winter dairy work is a study in contradictions. The same cold that threatens to freeze their livelihood also slows bacterial growth, giving them precious extra hours to process each batch. In the cheese room, a space so chilly their noses drip constantly, wheels of cheddar age on wooden shelves. The maid runs a finger along one rind, checking for mold spots that could ruin months of work. "You're like children," she tells the wheels. "Too much attention spoils you, but neglect kills you." At midday, the farm pauses for its main meal, a moment of respite woven through with unspoken calculations. The stew pot gets placed directly on the table, its steam fogging the windows as ladles scrape bottom. Everyone notices, but doesn't comment when the farmer serves himself mostly broth with a single cube of meat. The children get the choicest bits, gristle-free morsels fished out with surgical precision. Bread gets torn, not cut, to make the loaf seem larger. Conversation sticks to safe topics. The unexpected clutch of eggs found in the hayloft, the peddler's promised visit next week, the cousin in the next county whose cow bore twins. No one mentions the dwindling salt pork barrel, or how the apple seller's inventory has more rotten than sound fruit at this point. The grandmother tells a rambling story about the Great Frost of 1881, how neighbors survived on boiled leather and determination, which everyone understands is both entertainment and a warning. Afternoon brings a shift in labor. The women turn to winter's special projects, unraveling old sweaters to re-knit into mittens, rendering fat for soap making, sorting seed packets with the care of museum curators. One daughter practices her letters on a slate, tongue poking out in concentration as she copies Brussels sprouts from the seed catalog. Education happens in stolen moments here. A multiplication table recited while peeling potatoes, geography lessons traced in the flour dusting the table. The men return to the endless repair cycle. In the workshop, the hired man planes a replacement handle for the butter churn, his strokes so smooth the wood seems to shed its rough skin willingly. The farmer sharpens tools with a whetstone, the shink-shink rhythm punctuated by his commentary on each blade's history. This scythe belonged to my wife's grandfather. Took down an acre a day, they say. See how the metal's worn thin near the grip? That's from a lifetime of honest work. As daylight fades, priorities shift toward evening prep. The younger children get sent to gather the last eggs, their small hands deftly checking the straw-lined nests. Count 'em twice, their mother calls after them. Martha Short lost 3 hens to a fox that got in through a hole no bigger than your fist. The warning isn't hypothetical. Last week they found weasel tracks near the coop. Inside, the kitchen transforms into a nighttime fortress against the cold. Curtains get drawn tight, creating a smaller defensible space around the hearth. The fire gets built up with precious coal reserves, enough to last through evening chores, but not so much as to be wasteful. Someone fills the cast iron bed warmer with coals and runs it between the sheets, a fleeting luxury for the grandparents who'll retire first. And through it all, the unspoken question hangs like frost on the windows. Will we have enough? Enough food, enough fuel, enough strength to bridge the gap between now and spring's first green shoots. The answer lies in their hands, chapped, bruised, but still moving, still working, still fighting for one more day. As dusk bleeds across the frozen landscape, the farmhouse transforms into a sanctuary of flickering light and whispered conversations. The last golden rays cling to the frost-rimmed windows, fighting a losing battle against the creeping shadows. Inside, the family moves through their evening rituals with the quiet efficiency of soldiers preparing for night watch. The farmer's wife surveys her domain with a commander's eye. The cast iron range, still radiating waves of heat from the day's cooking, now becomes the focal point of their nighttime fortress. With practiced hands, she arranges the fire tools like surgical instruments. The poker standing sentinel, the ash shovel leaning at parade rest, the bellows resting within easy reach. Every movement is calculated to conserve energy. She knows exactly how many steps separate the woodpile from the hearth, how many scoops of coal will sustain the fire until dawn. Fetch the night candles, she tells her daughter, who scurries to the cold pantry where tallow dips are stored like ammunition. These homemade candles, rendered from autumn's butchering scraps, burn with a faint animal odor, but their smoky light is precious currency in winter's economy. The girl counts them aloud, her voice tense. 12 left, mama. The unspoken math hangs between them. 3 weeks until Candlemas if they ration carefully. Upstairs, the grandmother performs her own twilight inspection. Her gnarled fingers test each bed's straw tick for dampness, tuck woolen bed curtains tighter against drafts, and place heated stones wrapped in flannel at the foot of the children's beds. The master bed gets special treatment. A copper warming pan filled with embers from the kitchen fire is run between the sheets in precise strokes. Like ironing out the cold, she murmurs, her breath visible in the unheated bedroom. Meanwhile, the farmer and his son complete the critical last rounds outside. Their lantern casts wild shadows as they check livestock pens, their boots crunching through the icy crust that formed during the day's brief thaw. The boy carries a birch twig broom, sweeping fresh snow off the henhouse roof to prevent collapse. His father checks the barn's eaves with bare hands. When the wood feels strangely warm, it signals dangerous ice dams forming beneath the shingles. "Listen," the farmer suddenly whispers, gripping his son's shoulder. The distant howl of a fox cuts through the crystalline air. The boy instinctively checks his slingshot's position in his pocket. Yesterday, he found bloody feathers by the duck coop. They stand frozen, in every sense, until the threat moves off, their exhales forming quick white clouds of relief. Back inside, the family gathers for the evening meal, a sparse but strategic affair. The pot of midday stew has been stretched with extra barley and turnips, its flavor now more memory than substance. The wife serves it with yesterday's bread, toasted over the fire to disguise its staleness. The children receive their portions in chipped bowls that somehow always end up with the least cracks facing the adults, a small act of parental sleight of hand. Dinner conversation revolves around practicalities, the need to repair the cider press before it's needed, the upcoming full moon that will light essential nighttime chores, the neighbor's offer to share his bull come spring. No one mentions the ominous crack in the north pasture's ice-covered pond, or how the milk yield dropped again today. The grandmother tells a rambling tale about the moon's pantry, an old belief that winter nights store up cold like preserves to be dispensed when least expected. The children laugh, but the adults exchange glances. They've all felt that peculiar extra chill that comes just before dawn. After supper, the kitchen becomes a workshop of shadows and lamplight. The women take up their needles, darning, knitting, patching, their hands moving with muscle memory that transcends sight. The flickering light transforms their work into something almost magical, a sock darned by touch alone, a mitten's thumb reinforced without looking. The men occupy the table's other end, one sharpening tools on an oilstone, the other splicing rope for spring's plow harnesses. The children are put to educational use. The eldest girl reads aloud from the battered family Bible, her voice stumbling over begot, but soaring through the Psalms. Her brother practices sums on a slate, calculating how many days' worth of oats remain in the granary. Even the toddler contributes, sorting buttons into tin cans, a game that secretly trains color recognition and fine motor skills. As the evening deepens, the fire gets carefully banked, a ritual as precise as a chemist measuring volatile compounds. The farmer builds a nest of ash around the core embers, ensuring slow combustion without flare-ups. His wife arranges the fire irons in a specific pattern only they understand, a silent communication system. If the poker lean's left at dawn, it means he's already out doing chores. Right means he's ill and needs help. Bedtime arrives in shifts. The grandparents retire first, carrying their candle like a tiny sun against the darkness. The children go next after the nightly struggle of washing frozen faces in icy water. Last are the farmer and his wife, who use these final quiet moments for whispered conferences about supplies and spring plans. Their low voices mix with the fire's crackle, creating an intimate counterpoint to the wind's howl outside. In the bedrooms, cold reigns supreme despite all preparations. The children sleep three to a bed for warmth, their limbs tangled like puppies. The grandparents' breath forms frost on their bed curtains, but the heated stones at their feet buy a few precious hours of comfort. The master bed gets the luxury of a wool-stuffed mattress, still unforgiving by modern standards, but compared to the children's straw ticks, it's practically a palace. And through it all, the house itself groans and settles like a living thing. The frost creeping across window panes etches intricate maps of their isolation. The wind finds every unseen crack, playing the structure like a discordant flute. But inside their cocoons of wool and shared body heat, the family sleeps, or tries to. Their dreams filled with the promise of spring and the unrelenting arithmetic of survival. The dead of night wraps the farmhouse in its coldest embrace, when even the mice in the walls cease their scratching. It's during these frozen hours that the true test of Edwardian winter survival reveals itself, not in dramatic struggles, but in the microscopic battles fought beneath 5 layers of wool blankets. Upstairs, the children's shared breath forms ghostly clouds above their bed. The youngest whimpers in his sleep, his toes instinctively seeking the fading warmth of the brick wrapped in flannel at the foot of the mattress. His sister, half awake, pulls him closer without opening her eyes. This nightly dance of shared body heat perfected through countless winter nights. Their straw-tick mattress rustles like autumn leaves with every fidget, the sound strangely loud in the crystalline silence. Down the hall, the grandparents experience night differently. The old man's joints creak louder than the floorboards as he rises for his 2 a.m. vigil, a ritual born of necessity rather than insomnia. He checks each sleeping child by candlelight, his knobby fingers brushing foreheads for fever. Satisfied, he shuffles to the window, rubbing a peephole through the frost to read nature's bulletin board outside. The stars blaze with unnatural clarity. Too bright, he mutters, knowing such nights often precede brutal cold snaps. In the master bedroom, the farmer and his wife sleep in shifts. She startles awake at the faintest sound, a skill honed through lambing seasons and sick children. Tonight, it's the ominous pop of freezing water expanding in the bedroom jug that rouses her. She lies perfectly still, cataloging other sounds. The wind's direction has shifted northeast, bad. The cows are restless in the distant barn, worse, and, thank Providence, the grandfather's cough hasn't returned. Her husband sleeps like the dead beside her, but she knows his body will snap awake at first light regardless of rest. Meanwhile, the house itself wages its own war against the elements. The timbers groan like ship masts in a gale as they contract in the cold. Frost feathers spread across window panes with mathematical precision, their delicate patterns belying the destructive power behind their beauty. In the kitchen, the banked fire's glow paints the ceiling with pulsating shadows, a visual heartbeat proving the home still lives. Down in the root cellar, the carefully curated winter stores undergo their nightly trial. Potatoes left too near the wall develop glassy, frozen spots that will rot by morning. Jars of preserves ping as their contents freeze and expand. The ones with improper seals will shatter before dawn, their precious contents lost to the dirt floor. The hanging sides of bacon develop rime like Arctic explorers' beards, their fat turning translucent in the sub-zero temperatures. Outside, the farmyard becomes an alien landscape. The water pump's handle freezes mid-arc, requiring morning blows with a hammer to break free. Icicles longer than a man's arm dagger down from the barn's eaves. Beautiful, but deadly to anyone passing beneath when they inevitably crash. The snow itself changes character, its surface hardening into a crust that will support a man's weight at 3 a.m., but collapse treacherously by dawn. The animals endure their own private hells. The dairy cow's udder develops frostbite on one teat. She'll kick violently during tomorrow's milking. Chickens roost shoulder to shoulder, their body heat the only defense against frozen combs. The old sheepdog, allowed inside the barn tonight, curls around the pregnant ewe in an instinctive act of interspecies solidarity. At 4:17 a.m. precisely, the grandfather's pocket watch never lies. The temperature bottoms out. This is the hour when breath freezes in mustaches, when well water drawn for morning tea arrives and the bucket already slushy, when even the hardiest soul questions why humans ever settled this godforsaken latitude. It's also the moment when the house's defenses are stretched thinnest, blankets have shifted, heated bricks gone cold, and the kitchen fire's last embers cling to life like sailors to wreckage. Yet this is also when small miracles occur. The grandmother wakes sensing, not hearing, her husband's absence and rises to find him already building up the kitchen fire. The farmer's wife discovers her daughter has sneaked downstairs to start breakfast without being asked. The milkmaid, arriving early, finds the barn cats have curled around the youngest calves like living hot water bottles. As false dawn bleeds into the eastern sky, the family reassembles in the kitchen, some bleary-eyed, others oddly energized by the night's trials. They exchange no words about the cold, no complaints about broken sleep. Instead, they pass the steaming mug of strong tea in silent communion, their faces reflecting the fire's glow like some ancient cave painting of human resilience. Because they all know the unspoken truth. Last night was nothing special. Just another winter night in Edwardian England, where survival wasn't measured in degrees Fahrenheit, but in generations of accumulated wisdom passed through frostbitten fingers and chapped lips. Tonight will come again, and the night after that, until finally, mercifully, spring arrives to break winter's stranglehold. But for now, there are animals to feed, fires to rebuild, and another day's battle to wage against the cold. The grandfather's joints may predict snow, the grandmother's preserves may have frozen solid, and the children's toes may never fully warm until May. But they're still here, still fighting, still together. And that, in the end, is how Edwardian winters were survived. Dawn arrives like a reluctant guest on these deep winter mornings, pale and hesitant, casting shadows that seem too weak to exist in such cold. The farmhouse stirs before first light, its inhabitants moving through pre-dawn rituals perfected over generations of winters. The farmer is first to rise, his bare feet recoiling from floorboards colder than river stones. He dresses by touch in the darkness, layering wool like armor, each garment stiff with frost from the night's breath frozen in its fibers. Downstairs, he finds the kitchen exhaling the last warm sighs of the banked fire. Kneeling before the hearth, he performs the morning's most critical alchemy, resurrecting flame from ashes. His calloused hands move with sacramental precision, scattering ashes, arranging kindling, coaxing sparks into hungry orange tongues. Outside, the world holds its breath. Snow absorbs sound like a sponge, creating an eerie silence broken only by the occasional crack of freezing trees. The farmer's lantern cuts a feeble path through this muffled landscape as he trudges toward the barn. His boots leave perfect impressions in the snow, each step fracturing the crust with a satisfying crunch that echoes unnaturally loud in the stillness. The barn door groans in protest as he slides it open. Warmth and the ripe scent of animals rush out to greet him, a visceral reminder that this rickety structure is the difference between life and death for his livestock. The cows low softly, their enormous eyes reflecting lantern light like liquid amber. They know the routine: water first, then hay, then the blessed relief of milking for the heavy-uddered ladies. But today brings complications. The water trough has frozen solid overnight, its surface so hard it resists the first hammer blows. The farmer swears under his breath. Each wasted minute is daylight squandered. Finally, the ice shatters, revealing water so cold it makes his teeth ache just looking at it. The cows drink greedily, their tongues leaving momentary steam prints on the water's surface. Meanwhile, back in the farmhouse, the women have begun their own morning campaigns. The farmer's wife attacks the kitchen like a general marshalling troops. Yesterday's coals get raked into position. The porridge pot gets filled with measured oats. The tea kettle gets positioned just so over the hottest spot. Her daughter grinds coffee with one hand while using the other to prevent the toddler from toppling into the hearth. Their movements intersect in a delicate dance perfected through years of winter mornings, passing utensils without looking, dodging each other's trajectories by instinct. Upstairs, the grandmother performs her diagnostic rounds. She presses a practiced wrist to each child's forehead as they burrow deeper into their blankets. One gets deemed peakish and receives an extra layer before being sent downstairs. Another earns approval with rosy cheeks that suggest robust circulation. The eldest boy, always slow to wake, gets the dreaded cold cloth to the neck, a remedy that sends him bolting upright with a yelp that shakes the rafters. Breakfast is a utilitarian affair. Porridge thick enough to stand a spoon and gets doled out with military precision. The children receive theirs with a drizzle of precious honey, just enough to sweeten, but not enough to spoil. The adults take theirs plain, chasing it with bitter tea strong enough to stain the cup. Conversation is minimal and purposeful. The ice on the pond needs checking. The west pasture fence requires mending. The visiting vicar will expect proper hospitality come Sunday. As the weak winter sun finally crests the horizon, the farm erupts into coordinated action. The children get bundled into so many layers they resemble woolen snowmen, then dispatched to their chores. The eldest boy splits kindling with violent precision, his breath puffing like a steam engine. His sister collects eggs with hands wrapped in rags, her fingers still dexterous despite the bulk. Even the toddler contributes, solemnly carrying single sticks of firewood in a miniature wheelbarrow. The women turn to the endless winter maintenance. Today is washing day, a brutal undertaking in freezing weather. The copper boiler devours firewood as it heats endless gallons of water. The washboard becomes an instrument of torture, its ridges scraping knuckles raw as they scrub frozen dirt from fabric. Every item gets wrung out with maximum force. The less moisture remaining, the faster it will dry before freezing solid on the line. Out in the fields, the farmer and his hired man wage war against winter's encroachment. They repair stone walls where frost heaves have toppled centuries-old rocks. They clear drainage ditches choked with ice, back-breaking work that leaves their clothes stiff with frozen sweat. The hired man pauses to blow on his fingers, his breath momentarily warming them before the cold reclaims its territory. Like trying to light a candle in a hurricane, he mutters, earning a grim chuckle from his employer. At midday, the family reconvenes in the kitchen, their outer layers steaming as they thaw near the fire. The farmer's hands shake slightly as he accepts a mug of broth, the aftermath of hours spent gripping freezing tools. His wife notices, but says nothing, instead pressing a second slice of bread into his hand when he thinks no one is looking. The children, still buzzing with morning energy, chatter about their discoveries. A fox's tracks near the henhouse, an oddly shaped icicle, the first brave snowdrop pushing through near the south wall. The afternoon brings specialized tasks. The grandmother presides over the darning circle, her needles flashing as she teaches the girls how to weave invisible repairs. The farmer retreats to his workshop, where the smell of hot metal and linseed oil mixes with the sharp tang of freshly planed wood. His son watches intently as he demonstrates how to fashion a new handle for the butter churn, each shaving of wood a lesson in patience and precision. As daylight fades, the rhythm changes again. The animals demand evening attention, water refreshed, feed distributed, doors secured against predators. The children make their final rounds, their voices carrying oddly in the crystalline air as they count chickens and latch gates. Inside, the kitchen transforms into an evening sanctuary, its warmth a palpable reward for the day's labors. And through it all, the cold remains, an ever-present adversary that shapes every action, every decision, every ounce of their being. It's in the way they hunch their shoulders against the wind, in the careful rationing of firewood, in the silent prayers for just one more week of preserved potatoes. This isn't just winter. It's a marathon of endurance, run in wool socks and leather boots across frozen earth. Yet somehow, improbably, they persist. Not through heroics, but through the accumulated wisdom of countless small actions. The extra stitch in a mitten, the strategically placed windbreak, the shared body heat in a too-cold bed. The Edwardian winter isn't conquered. It's outlasted, one stubborn day at a time. The heart of winter reveals its cruelest paradox. The very strategies that keep the farmhouse alive also conspire to suffocate its inhabitants. By late January, the airtight seals that preserve warmth become prisons trapping stale air, wood smoke, and the accumulated odors of too many bodies living in too close quarters. The kitchen, once a haven of warmth, now feels like the belly of some great beast, its atmosphere thick with the competing scents of drying wool, simmering turnips, and the ever-present tang of the chamber pot barely concealed behind a curtain. The farmer's wife moves through this miasma with a handkerchief pressed to her nose, muttering about winter stench as she grates precious nutmeg over a milk pudding. This small luxury, spices hoarded like gold dust, is her weapon against sensory deprivation. Upstairs, the grandmother conducts her weekly battle against damp. She patrols the bedrooms like a suspicious general, running her hands along walls where condensation threatens to breed mold. Her arsenal includes a vinegar-soaked rag for wiping down windows and a secret stash of dried lavender sewn into sachets that she tucks between mattress ticks. Sweet dreams need sweet air, she tells the skeptical children, though they secretly think the lavender smells like grandmothers and mothballs. The schoolroom, really just a corner of the parlor with a wobbly table, becomes an exercise in creative discomfort. The children huddle around a single candle, their breath visible as they practice penmanship on slates that frost over between letters. The eldest boy keeps breaking the ice film with his sleeve, leaving smeared sums that look like ancient ruins. Their teacher, a neighbor's daughter earning her keep, has developed a permanent squint from deciphering work in such poor light. Meanwhile, the farmer and his men wage war against winter's structural assaults. Today's mission: preventing the well pump from freezing solid. They wrap its mechanism in burlap strips soaked in brine, a trick that lowers the freezing point through chemistry rather than brute force. The hired man, a veteran of Canadian winters, contributes his own innovation, a slow drip system using a leaking bucket that keeps water moving just enough to resist icing. Their breath hangs in the air as they work, three men moving like steam engines in the crystalline cold. The livestock exhibit their own cabin fever. The usually docile dairy cow has developed a habit of kicking over her milk pail, not from malice, but sheer frustration at her confinement. The farmer's wife has taken to singing to her during milking, old folk songs that seem to calm both woman and beast. The chickens, normally creatures of habit, have begun pecking at each other's feathers, a sign of stress that prompts the family to hang cabbage heads from the coop ceiling as edible distractions. Dinner becomes an exercise in creative scarcity. The root cellar, once brimming, now shows alarming gaps between the remaining turnips and carrots. The farmer's wife invents a game called Treasure Stew, throwing odd bits, a lone parsnip, some dried beans, the last wrinkled apple, into the pot and declaring it an adventure. The children play along, pretending not to notice how their parents' portions grow smaller while theirs remain steady. After supper, the family engages in their primary winter entertainment, the careful examination of their own bodies. Chilblains get treated with goose grease, cracked knuckles with beeswax salve. The grandmother inspects everyone's teeth with a practiced eye, scurvy being a very real threat this late in winter. She administers doses of malt extract with the solemnity of an apothecary, though the children suspect it's just molasses rebranded as medicine. Evening brings its own peculiar challenges. The candles, now burning shorter each night, cast eerie shadows that transform familiar objects into looming monsters. The toddler becomes convinced a closet wolf lives in the corner cupboard, a fantasy the family humors by conducting elaborate wolf hunts with fireplace pokers. The real danger, of course, is carbon monoxide from the bank fire, though they only know it as bad air that causes morning headaches if the dampers aren't set just right. As bedtime approaches, the rituals grow more elaborate. The warming pans get filled with extra care. Too many coals risk burning the sheets. Too few make the exercise pointless. The children's nightshirts are toasted before the fire, a small luxury that earns delighted squeals when donned. The grandmother distributes her secret weapon, hot stones wrapped in flannel that get passed from person to person like sacred objects before being tucked under blankets. Yet for all these precautions, the night remains an adversary. The house creaks and groans like a living thing, its timbers protesting the cold. Ice forms intricate patterns on the insides of windows, beautiful but ominous reminders of nature's power. The wind finds every unseen crack, its whistles transforming into phantom voices in the dark. And through it all, the family persists. They joke about 3-dog nights, when even the hounds are invited indoors to sleep at their feet. They invent elaborate stories about the king of winter, who must be appeased with burnt toast offerings. They measure time not in days, but in small victories. the first crocus sighting, the day the milk yield increases, the morning the sun finally feels warm on their faces during chores. Because that's the secret no Instagram cottage photo captures. Winter survival isn't about aesthetics. It's about enduring the smell of wet wool and chamber pots, about laughing when your breath freezes your mustache to the blanket, about finding joy in a shared apple when the cellar is nearly empty. The Edwardian farmhouse in deep winter isn't picturesque. It's alive in all its messy, smelly, glorious resilience. February arrives like a starving wolf at the door, lean, desperate, and testing every weakness in the farm's defenses. This is the month when winter's accumulated hardships compound into existential threats, when even the most resilient souls begin measuring time in teaspoons of preserves rather than calendar pages. The farmhouse now operates like a besieged castle under constant assault. The farmer's wife has developed an intricate rotation system for their dwindling supplies. Today's breakfast features barley porridge sweetened with the last dregs of summer honey, while tomorrow's will use molasses instead. She keeps a mental ledger of every potato sprouting in the cellar, every wrinkled apple that might still yield a quarter cup of pulp. Her hands, red and cracked from constant washing in icy water, move with economizing precision as she portions out flour like a pharmacist dispensing medicine. Upstairs, the grandmother has transformed into a one-woman salvage operation. She spends her days unraveling old sweaters to re-knit into mittens, melting candle stubs into new tapers, and cutting down worn-out adult clothes to fit the growing children. Her latest project involves stitching together a patchwork quilt from fabric scraps, each square telling a story of seasons past. This blue came from your grandfather's best Sunday shirt, she tells the children as they watch. And this red was your mother's first winter dress. The quilt grows slowly, its irregular stitches forming a tactile history of the family's resilience. Outside, the landscape has taken on a skeletal quality. The orchard trees stand like frozen sentinels, their branches clattering in the wind like bones. Snow no longer falls in soft flakes, but in stinging pellets that scour exposed skin. The farmer and his hired man move through this bleakness like shadows, their work now focused on pure survival, hauling water, breaking ice, keeping pathways clear for essential movements. The livestock have entered their own version of winter austerity. The dairy cow's ribs show through her shaggy coat, despite extra rations of oil cake. The pigs, usually voracious, have become lethargic in their straw-lined den, their fat reserves slowly metabolizing to keep them alive. Even the chickens have reduced their laying to every third day, their combs pale from lack of sunshine. The farmer watches them all with a practiced eye, making mental calculations about who gets extra feed and who must make do. Midday meals have become exercises in culinary alchemy. The farmer's wife transforms yesterday's leftover porridge into fritters by binding it with a precious egg and frying it in rendered fat. Tough cuts of salt pork get simmered for hours with dried beans until edible. The children are tasked with picking through the grain stores, removing any weevils or moldy bits. Work that's both disgusting and critically important. Every speck counts. Their mother reminds them as they groan over the tedious task. The school lessons have taken on urgent practicality. Instead of abstract arithmetic, the children now calculate how many days' worth of oats remain in the bin. Geography becomes a discussion of which neighboring farms might have surplus hay for sale. Even reading practice uses the seed catalog as its text, the descriptions of spring vegetables serving as both education and psychological sustenance. As afternoon fades, the family turns to indoor crafts that double as necessary repairs. The men work on tool maintenance, sharpening blades, replacing handles, oiling leather harnesses. The women spin wool into yarn, their spinning wheels humming a monotonous lullaby of survival. The children card wool or sort seeds, their small fingers surprisingly adept at detailed work. Even the toddler helps, stacking firewood into precarious towers that everyone pretends are useful. The early darkness brings its own challenges. Lamp oil must be rationed carefully. Too much light tonight could mean darkness tomorrow. The family clusters around a single light source, their activities chosen for how well they can be done in dim illumination. The grandmother tells stories from memory, her voice weaving tales of past winters survived against all odds. The children listen while their hands remain busy shelling dried beans or untangling fishing line. Bedtime routines have grown more elaborate as the cold intensifies. The warming pan makes its rounds, heating each bed in strict rotation. Stone bottles filled with hot water get wrapped in flannel and placed at the foot of the children's beds. The adults take turns staying up to tend the fire, 2-hour shifts that ensure no one gets too exhausted. And through it all, the unspoken question hangs in the frosty air. Will we last? The answer lies in the careful accounting of resources, in the stubborn refusal to surrender to despair, in the quiet determination to meet each day's challenges as they come. Because that's the essence of Edwardian winter survival. Not dramatic heroics, but the cumulative effect of countless small acts of courage. The extra blanket shared without being asked. The covert transfer of food from one plate to another. The pre-dawn fire lit before anyone else stirs. These are the moments that build the bridge to spring, one fragile span at a time. The first whispers of spring arrive not with fanfare, but through nearly imperceptible signs that the farm family has been conditioned over generations to detect. It's in the way the morning frost lingers just 15 minutes less than yesterday, how the icicles drip for a precious half-hour at midday before refreezing, and the subtle softening of animal tracks in the snow. These fragile promises spark a quiet revolution in the household's winter-weary rhythms. The farmer becomes an obsessive reader of nature's fine print. Each morning he performs his thaw test, placing a copper penny on a south-facing stone and timing how long it takes to melt through the ice beneath. Yesterday, 3 hours and 17 minutes. Today, 3 hours and 9 minutes. He records these minuscule victories in his weather journal like a scientist documenting a cure. His wife notices other clues. The kitchen sourdough starter now bubbles with renewed vigor after weeks of sluggishness, and the cream separates faster in the pantry, signaling subtle temperature shifts. Even the children sense the change. The eldest boy swears he heard a winter wren song during wood chopping, a claim met with skepticism until his sister spots the first brave snowdrop pushing through near the manure pile. Their discovery sparks a frenzied scavenger hunt for other signs. Animal tracks showing longer strides, less energy conserved against cold, tree buds slightly plumper than last week, spiderwebs glistening with purposeful dew instead of frost. The livestock respond with their own biological clocks. The dairy cow's milk flow increases almost imperceptibly, just 2 extra squirts per teat, but enough to make the farmer's hands pause mid-milking. The chickens, previously lethargic, begin squabbling over nesting boxes again. Best of all, the pregnant ewes start bagging up, their udders swelling with the promise of lambs and fresh milk. The farmer marks these developments on his mental calendar, calculating how soon they can reduce hay rations when spring grass emerges. Indoors, the grandmother conducts her own seasonal divination. She inspects the attic beams for returning ladybugs. Their appearance traditionally signals winter's retreat. She saves onion skins in a special jar, watching for the day they dry faster than new ones accumulate. A folk method for predicting the last frost. Most importantly, she monitors the test sock, a wool stocking hung near the chimney where its shrinkage rate indicates humidity changes. See how the stitches are relaxing? She shows the children. Winter's grip is slipping. The farmhouse itself seems to exhale as temperatures moderate. Window frost now melts into daytime puddles that must be mopped, creating a messy but welcome chore. Firewood consumption drops by 1 log per evening, a small reprieve for the woodpile that's been whittled down to its last 2 rows. Best of all, the chamber pot no longer freezes overnight, eliminating the morning ritual of chipping ice from its porcelain depths. Food preservation strategies shift accordingly. The farmer's wife begins cellar testing, moving a few potatoes from cold storage to the slightly warmer pantry to see if they'll sprout safely. She reduces the salt in the daily bacon ration, gambling that cooler nights rather than deep freeze will now suffice for preservation. The children are thrilled to discover their morning porridge occasionally includes dried apple bits again, a luxury withheld during winter's peak to prevent scurvy. Work routines adapt to the changing conditions. The farmer and his hired man start repairing fences during afternoon thaws, their hammers driving staples into wood that's finally soft enough to accept nails without splitting. The women air out winter bedding during precious sunny hours, beating wool blankets with switches to dislodge months of dust and mites. Even the toddler's chores evolve. His stick gathering now includes sorting potential kindling from materials suitable for spring planting markers. Yet this transitional period brings its own dangers. The same thaw that eases their burdens also creates treacherous ice sheets on rooftops, potential avalanches waiting to decapitate the unwary. The farmer's wife develops a nervous habit of glancing upward whenever passing beneath eaves, her body remembering the uncle lost to a sliding roof ice slab. The children receive strict warnings about unstable snow bridges forming over the creek, their usual shortcut, now a potential death trap. The weather oscillates between false spring and winter's last gasps. One morning dawns with such warmth that the family eats breakfast with the door ajar, only to be slammed by a blizzard that afternoon. The farmer's journal records these mood swings with clinical precision. February 27th, first bees sighted. February 28th, 6-inch snowfall. March 1st, hail stripped buds from South Orchard. Through it all, the family walks a psychological tightrope, daring to hope while preparing for disappointment. The grandmother sums it up while stirring a pot of stone soup, water, a bone, and whatever vegetable scraps remain. Spring comes like a shy suitor, showing interest one day, disappearing the next. Best keep your dowry packed until he proves serious. And so they wait, watch, and interpret. The children mark the days by scratching lines on an attic beam, not the official calendar's rigid squares, but their own winding tally that reflects winter's ebb and flow. The farmer studies his animals for clues, knowing their instincts surpass any almanac. The women monitor their pantry like generals assessing remaining ammunition before the final push. Because that's the true lesson of an Edwardian late winter. Spring isn't an event, but a slow negotiation with a stubborn adversary. Every melted icicle is a concession, each returning bird a diplomat from warmer lands. The family's survival now hinges on reading these subtle cues correctly, knowing when to ease rationing, when to risk early planting, when to trust that winter has truly broken. And so the farmhouse remains poised between seasons, its inhabitants balanced between caution and optimism. They've survived winter's worst. Now they must navigate its messy divorce from spring. The final stand of winter plays out in fits and starts, a temperamental actor refusing to exit the stage gracefully. March arrives with gale-force winds that rattle the farmhouse's very bones, followed by deceptive warm spells that tempt the family into premature optimism. This is the season of false promises and hard lessons, where one day's thaw becomes the next morning's treacherous ice sheet underfoot. The farmer has developed a new morning ritual, standing barefoot on the frozen ground for exactly 13 seconds. He counts by pulse beats, testing the earth's willingness to release its winter grip. Yesterday, his toes registered a faint yielding. Today, the soil remains stubborn as iron. He records these observations in his weather journal with a chemist's precision. March 7th, ground still sleeping. Frost depth, 9 inches by crowbar measure. His wife monitors the kitchen's microclimate like a ship's captain watching barometric pressure. The sourdough starter now bubbles with alarming enthusiasm, requiring twice daily feedings that strain their dwindling flour reserves. She's caught between two fears, wasting precious grain on an overactive culture versus missing the chance to bake proper risen bread after months of flat, dense loaves. Her compromise involves elaborate calculations, adjusting feeding ratios based on outdoor temperature trends scrawled on the pantry wall in charcoal. The children have become expert phenologists without knowing the term. They track returning birds with the intensity of ornithologists, the first determined robin pecking at still frozen ground, a pair of wood pigeons reconnoitering the barn's rafters. Their daily treasure hunts now yield exciting finds. A patch of ground ivy greening under the south wall, frogs pawn in the ditch's last ice-rimmed puddles, the intoxicating scent of warming earth when they dig beneath the snowdrifts. Livestock behavior shifts dramatically as daylight lengthens. The dairy cow's milk takes on a subtly sweeter note, the precursor to rich spring grass affecting her production. The pigs, previously lethargic lumps in their straw nest, now root at their enclosure's edges with renewed purpose, their powerful snouts uncovering frozen acorns missed by autumn squirrels. Even the barn cats grow restless, bringing half-eaten mice to the doorstep like offerings to hasten the season's change. The farmhouse itself seems to groan with seasonal tension. Plaster cracks appear as the structure expands and contracts with temperature swings. The grandmother fills them with a paste of flour, water, and her secret ingredient, urine, though she calls it liquid mending. Floorboards that stayed rigid all winter now creak alarmingly underfoot, releasing months of pent-up complaints. The attic, previously avoided due to its Arctic conditions, becomes the children's favorite play space as its temperature moderates, though their mother still insists on mittens for any prolonged stay. Food supplies enter their most precarious phase. The last apples in the cellar show alarming wrinkles, their skins like parchment over softening flesh. The farmer's wife performs daily triage, slicing usable portions from rotting sections, distilling the salvageable into emergency pie, filling sweetened with the dregs of molasses. The salt pork barrel now contains more brine than meat, prompting creative reinterpretations. Thin slices fried to crispness as bacon illusions, boiled shreds stretched into dumpling fillings with wild garlic shoots scavenged from south-facing banks. Work routines adapt to the season's capriciousness. Mornings still belong to winter, chopping remaining ice from troughs, mending snow-damaged fences. Afternoons flirt with spring, turning compost heaps that have frozen solid since November, pruning fruit trees while their sap still sleeps. The farmer's hands transition seamlessly from wielding an ice chisel to delicately grafting pear cuttings, his thick gloves discarded for the first time in months despite the lingering chill. The women wage their own seasonal campaigns. The grandmother oversees the great wash, hauling every textile not nailed down outside at the first sign of sunshine, beating winter's staleness from woolens with willow switches. The farmer's wife attacks the kitchen's greasy film, a winter's worth of tallow, smoke, and flour dust, using sand scrub and vinegar with militant vigor. Even the youngest girls participate, their small hands polishing pewter with wood ash paste until it gleams like captured moonlight. Community bonds, strained by winter's isolation, begin re-warming with the earth. The first peddler's cart appears on the still muddy lane, his wares greeted like exotic treasures, needles, salt, a single precious orange wrapped in oilcloth. Neighbors exchange cautious visits, comparing notes on frost depth and lambing dates with the intensity of generals planning a campaign. The church bell rings with renewed authority, summoning the faithful to give thanks for surviving another winter. Yet winter hasn't surrendered. An early March blizzard descends without warning, trapping the family indoors for 3 interminable days. They pass the time with increasingly desperate inventiveness. The children's staging shadow puppet shows using candlelight and stretched sheepskin. The adults playing memory games recalling every variety of apple grown in the orchard. When the storm finally breaks, they emerge squinting into a transformed world, dazzling white under a sun suddenly potent enough to burn their winter-pale skin. This final winter assault leaves the family chastened but wiser. They resume their seasonal observations with renewed respect for nature's unpredictability. The farmer's journal entries grow more nuanced, noting not just temperature but wind direction, cloud formations, even the flight patterns of returning geese. His wife adjusts her baking schedule to accommodate wild yeast's whims, while the grandmother revises her folk predictions to account for false springs and second winters. And through it all, life persists. The first lambs arrive in a bloody, miraculous rush. Two strong males who stand within minutes despite snow still crusting the pasture. The kitchen garden's protective mulch gets pulled back in careful stages, revealing garlic shoots that overwintered with stubborn optimism. The farmer's hands, cracked and calloused from months of cold labor, now spend evenings gently cradling peach pits saved for planting, their rough surfaces promising sweet futures. Because that's the final lesson of an Edwardian winter's end. Survival isn't marked by a single victory, but by countless small reconciliations between human endurance and nature's rhythms. The family's celebration isn't grand, just an evening spent with the door cracked open to air out winter's ghosts, their faces turned toward a sunset that finally, unquestionably, stays light past supper time.